Greetings everyone and welcome to another exciting episode of IT Pro TV. I'm your host Daniel Lowry, and in today's episode we're continuing on with our VCA series. Joining us back in the studio again today to help us out with that endeavor is our good friend Mr. Ronnie Wong. Ronnie, welcome back to the show. How's it going?
Well, thank you again for having me back on the show, and it's a great day again to actually be right here as we take a look at the VCA. Remember, that's VMware's Certified Associate version 6. And we're actually getting ready for that exam, as well as actually making sure you understand the concepts here of data center virtualization, really kind of the foundational level of it too. And so during our series so far, right, we've kind of reviewed some different virtualization concepts. We've also, of course, talked about the idea of benefits of data center virtualization. And along with benefits then, that means there's always the flip side of this. And the flip side of this, of course, would be challenges that we actually are going to end up facing in terms of data center virtualization. And so we're going to actually be talking about those a little bit more as well. But since this is a VMware-centered type of show, and we also want to make sure that we understand that this is part of what they want you to learn about too, is that essentially VMware is saying, look, when it comes down to data center virtualization, we want to be your product. That's what it comes down to, right? They want to make sure that they are your product. They are so interested in that, right? That part of their own business plan, their goal, right, is to actually say, look, we want to become everybody's choice virtualization platform. And so that's what they're trying to do. They don't care about what operating system you're running. They don't care whether you're actually, for a particular type of business, like insurance like Dan worked in, or the idea of something like what we're doing. They say, look, we want to be that. If you had an ISP, they want to actually be your choice for virtualization as well. You name it, they're just saying, look, that's what we want to do. We want to corner the entire market of virtualization. So when they start talking about doing stuff like that, right, they actually did introduce several different products for us, but the main product that they actually wanted to introduce to really help out with the idea of data center virtualization is something that we call vSphere. Okay, so yeah, it's exactly like it sounds like a sphere, like a globe, and then of course they just put the lowercase v in front of it, which is, for one reason or another, stands for VMware, even though VMware is actually capitalized and VM and the W there. But a lowercase v is one of those unusual things, but that's the main product that they are really trying to get you to really hook into if you are thinking about the idea of data center virtualization. And so we want to take a look at those, at the different versions of those products just briefly, and then we'll actually even kind of show you a little bit about the cost side of it, which is not as pretty as you'd like it to be, but it depends on a little bit more, of what your company business is going to be. So that's what we're taking a look at first. Is we're going to first start off with some of the different editions of VMware that you should be familiar with as you get ready for this exam. And then, of course, in a business place, you got to be able to pick the right one that you also need. The good thing is VMware really helps us out with that, and we can take a look at it directly from their website. So let's go and take a look on my screen, and we'll show you what we're talking about here. So when it comes down to what we're normally looking for, right, most of the time on the technical side, okay, that's where you and I come in as an expert, as somebody actually recommended this, is that we would need to look up the features, be able to compare, and actually know what we need to do, okay? And so the good thing is you can actually go ahead and just do a search, and that's what I did. I searched for vSphere editions is what I did, and that gave me right here in this product sheet here, or the vSphere and vSphere with operations management sheet. It came right up. I selected the compare, and that way we can actually take a look at all three. So the three editions, let me see if I can zoom in just a little bit more to help us out and scroll over a little bit so that we can take a look here. There's vSphere Standard. Okay, there's vSphere Enterprise Plus, which I can't say right now, and then there's also the vSphere Operations Management Enterprise Plus as well. Now, for the exam, this is what I want you to focus in on, because this is where you may see different terminology. Okay, right now on the exam itself, this particular terminology has changed a little bit. By a little bit, usually what you might actually end up seeing is vSphere Standard. You might see the term vSphere Enterprise and then vSphere Enterprise Plus as far as the different levels go. So even though it's the latest exam that's actually out there, this particular terminology has changed a little bit, where no longer do you just have Enterprise, but now they actually say you have Enterprise Plus, and now you have vSphere with Operations Management Enterprise Plus, So somewhere along the line, they decided to kind of say, look, everything that we're doing is a plus. It's not just an enterprise edition itself. So you may actually see a little bit of a different terminology, but the features match up just like this. And so they just kind of changed the naming. I don't know why. It's just the way that they chose to market is what happens. So what is the main kind of comparison when you start taking a look at the features? Well, over here on the left-hand side then in vSphere Standard, right? What we really want to actually do is focus in on this top line, which talks about what the actual feature is and what it actually does for us. What does the main product do? Well, if you're really looking for basic server consolidation to help you also out with what we call business continuity, right? Now, when we start talking about the idea of business continuity, what we're really saying there is no planned downtime, okay? So we know that things are going to end up happening where, servers will die, fires happen, all that stuff. Hopefully it won't happen to you. But what we're actually saying is we don't want there to be maintenance downtime, okay? And so one of those things in vSphere Standard is this idea of being able to do everything. All your maintenance and everything else can actually go on while vSphere is running, while your virtualized data center is actually continuing to go on. You do not have to shut down part of your data center to actually continue to have service that, that you need for your network, okay? But once that's actually done though, okay, after that point, now this is where it actually begins to be a little bit more challenging in this fact, okay? You don't have a lot of the neat management tools, okay? You really don't. You have basic management. You can go in there and create VMs. You can do, a few things here. You can manage a few resources overall and create your own data stores. But when it comes down to it, right, this actually is a little bit more clunky than what most of us are going to be used to. But right out of the box, though, you can at least do this stuff, where you can set up high availability, you can set up your motion storage and all that stuff as well. And so you do have that access to be able to do so. Now, of course, for it to work, notice that they also put in something else, which they don't tell you about yet, except for right down here. If you're going to run this, you also need to, of course, have the vCenter Server Standard edition to make it work. And then, I zoomed in so much you didn't actually see what was in parentheses over here. Let me scroll over if I can't. Oh, I really zoomed in too much. Let me see if I can scroll in. There we go. Notice that it actually does say sold separately. Okay, so you're actually starting to see that, hey, price may actually kind of add up here. But this is a great addition probably for a small market, a person that, or a business, I keep saying a person, a business that says, look, we need kind of the basics. We really need it to get it done, and we need to ensure that our services are always available here. As far as our data center, that's kind of the heart and management of what we need here. So let's stick with that. And you'll probably be perfectly fine with that and actually work with it forever and probably not have any problems with it as well, okay? So along with that, if you want to find out more features, we're going to be talking about several of these throughout our series. Let me zoom in just a little bit more as far as the product features go. We're going to be going over the stuff that you actually talk about here, such as I'm trying to make sure I don't hover over it. Yeah, hover and covering everything else. We're going to take a look at vMotion and the storage vMotion. We'll take a look at the high availability, data protection, and fault tolerance. We'll be focusing in on that as well as the idea of hot add too. And some of these features that we have available, we'll go a little bit more in depth over it. But you actually see why this is about the business continuity, right? The idea of vMotion, right, allows us to be able to move virtual machines from one failing server over to another one using the idea of high availability. In other words, managing it a little bit better and actually making it so fast that it seems seamless. In other words, zero downtime. You may not even know it's going on. Okay, that's the way that it goes. And then issuing out fault tolerance. Again, all these features are actually built in. And the idea of hot add is kind of an amazing one. Even at the most standard edition here, Daniel, and like I said, I'll probably mention it again. You'll probably go, I think Ronnie already mentioned that. It happened. In hot add, Daniel, if we need to increase, let's say, the capacity of my VM, if I need to actually add in an additional NIC, if I need to add in additional hardware, another virtual hard drive, everything, I don't have to actually power down that VM. Okay, I just simply add it, and it will end up working and showing up without me having to turn off that VM. So that's in the middle of service. We can do that. The unusual thing, though, is that if I want to remove it, I have to power it down.
It lets you put it there.
It lets you put it there, but not remove it.
Take it away without shutting the thing down. Well, you know what, though? normally if you're decommissioning things, I guess it's going to come down anyway, because if I took away a NIC, then it's losing some sort of connection to something. So it just makes sense, I guess, that it would be powered down at that point. But having the ability to actually add something without having to stop production on the server,
cool.
I'm sold. Where do I sign? Where do I write the check out to? Because that is nice.
Yeah, that is one of the main benefits and features, and probably one of the best things that you can actually think about for a small business, instead of going, oh yeah, we're going to have to bring down that server for 5 or 10 minutes while we test out this component and see, will it show up? And then it doesn't show up, and then you have to go, oh, we have to power it down again.
And the server's down for an hour.
Yeah, the server's down for an
you don't
hour.
want that.
You name it, it ends up happening. Okay. There's also what they call resource prioritization. Now, this is actually new inside of the standard edition by comparison to what it once was. Okay. So even though you could actually get what we call virtual volumes, essentially allowing you to aggregate together all of your storage stuff, which is perfectly great and fine, being able to do what we call storage-based policy management. In other words, being able to actually assign it the way that I want to, not just because of the way the configuration is another thing. Now, this actually used to only happen in that Enterprise Edition and above. Now they've actually moved it on to the actual Standard Edition here as well. Okay, so you see that they started actually kind of all of a sudden the rest of this stuff here, yeah, this is all insanely neat stuff that you actually end up seeing right back here in terms of reliable memory, big data extensions for working with well, big data, right? Hadoop data and stuff like that. You see it, and all these extra kind of very advanced features that you see, such as the storage distributed resource scheduler that allows you to manage it based on policy. There's a lot more that actually goes here that's very fast, again, allowing for seamless ideas here, okay? The content library gives us that ability, and so I'm not going to go through this for every single one, but at least on the standard here we will, because there's a few areas here. Content library allows us to be able to have ISOs, files, and stuff. And you might say, well, of course we need those things. Well, on your server, right, if you have more than one ESX host server, you only really have one content library that essentially is central repository. But the nice thing is content library is once you actually start getting multiple ESX servers, it can become distributed, okay? And that means it doesn't matter which one of those servers it's on, you can gain access to it. And so that's why it's also an important feature as well. Same thing with array integrations too, being able to add that in. So usually when you start taking a look at features, most of us that are working in a fairly small office, the standard is probably going to be the way that you end up seeing that. Now here's something else that's actually kind of neat as well, is that when you start taking away that standard edition, notice it says 1 per CPU, okay? Now this is actually important here when we start talking about the cost and the price, right? 1 per CPU. It doesn't mean that if I have a quad-core processor, right, that I have to buy 4 separate licenses. It's actually the socket itself, the one CPU here. But if you happen to have multiple sockets, though, you're going to pay the price for it, and you do need to make sure you pay attention to that. Now, not so much for the exam, but it is something that can kind of get you in real life. If you go, oh no, I didn't know, I just bought it for my server and it's only actually allowing me to virtualize, well, it says that I need an additional license. Well, that's why, okay?
Yeah, and they're definitely starting to address the fact that they realize that you have quad-core processors out there, and a lot, not just VMware, everybody's doing it. They're saying, hey, you need to pay for all those cores. So look, excuse me, look for that in the future.
Right. The Enterprise Plus here, when we start taking a look at that, that one actually does have more detailed resource management and actually can keep your applications up and moving much more efficiently as well. You'll see it has all of the same features as what the actual standard edition does, but then when it comes down to these resource prioritizations, what is that about? Well, we realize that inside of our virtualized environment, we're going to have some servers that absolutely demand more resources, okay, than other servers ever will. Well, what this resource management actually gives us the ability to do is to say, we can assign that. We can actually pick and say, hey, look, here's what we can do. We'll say that this server, this server, this server is going to be able to actually have more resources on demand if they want to, or I can schedule it. Let's say I realize that there's a certain time of day that everybody's hitting our web servers. I can say, hey, I want that particular server to have all the resources and actually even scrunch down on resources which I know it's not going to be very busy. So imagine having that capability on demand to be able to do stuff like that as well. And there's even more features here which we'll get into in a later series as well. Okay, so we're going to talk about virtual volumes later on. We'll take a look at briefly about the storage-based management here, and then we'll talk about storage DNS and storage I/O control, as well as network I/O control that allows us to actually be able to manage that the resource distributions the way that we want to much better too. And again, the content library is still there, and this time it also gives us the ability to create what we call a distributed switch instead of a standard switch. So we can virtualize even our switches and be able to manage them much more efficiently by using the distributed switch, which means actually they can actually be connected to, well, anywhere and allow us to be able to manage the resources there as one big management. Now, when it comes down to the newest editions here, this, of course, is the premium edition that we'll actually end up seeing. Let's see if I can scroll over. I can't here. So we might actually have
Just
to
push
kind of,
over with your mouse.
yeah. Oh, there we go. Just a little bit more. There we go. Okay. So there it is. This one has every feature. That's what it comes down to, right? If you need everything, this is the one to actually go with. But remember that there's still a few other extras that you can add in there for an additional cost. And all of this is also based off of that vCenter server that you'll still have to buy on top of that. If you need that management capability, if you're going to do this, can you actually run all this? Yes. But you still need to actually purchase all that stuff to do it. Now here, it does go through everything. And we, of course, are not going to actually be covering every little bit of everything. If you want to actually do that, make sure you go on beyond the idea of the VCA, right, and go to the VCP and even higher if you're going to do that. But just kind of realize that those are kind of some of the different additions that you will be facing. Now, when we take a look, though, here's what I also wanted us to focus in on a little bit. Now, this is not necessarily for the exam, but it does help you to hit home when you start saying, all right, we need to make a decision on this. How much is it going to cost us? Well, that's where you can come back and you can start seeing this too. So right now, as of the recording of this episode, right, here's the prices. I can't tell you it's not going to change because I don't make their policies. So, we'll let them make their policies because it's a great product that they have available. But you can see kind of some of these pricings here, and these are all done in terms of US dollars for right now. But the baseline product, right, it starts off pretty hefty, but once you actually do that, so this is about $1,000 right here just for that standard. But notice that also means 1 year support and subscription after you buy that base one. Well, notice that you still have to actually pay an additional yearly kind of contract or fee if you're going to be doing this. And then if you go to the highest one here, that's what I have. Now, you think $1,000 is steep, but remember that you still have to actually go back in and even purchase that vCenter. And I can't remember. Oh, there it is. Okay. So, all I need is on top of that is vCenter server standard. Look at that. That's an additional $5,000 and then an additional $1,000 per year as well. So can this stuff get costly? Yes. But this is a question that Daniel asked in other episodes, right? How much is your data worth? Okay? And that's why companies are going to pay whatever they need to pay. And the reason why is because this is kind of the premium, this is the top of the line product here. We're not knocking any other person's product, but VMware, what they specialize in, well, virtualization. I mean, if you want the premium product, it does cost a bit here. Now, of course, along with that, they actually do have some additions, okay, that you might actually end up doing. And this actually goes beyond that standard edition here. If I scroll down, we're not really worried about those essentials kits, but you will also see them mentioned, especially in the exam, about what we call acceleration kits. And this is because the bigger your data center grows, the more it spreads out. Well, even software has a limitation. And so here they're saying, look, you may actually end up having to do what we call these acceleration kits. And now this is where all of a sudden it becomes choking to actually go base license only is what it says, license price only. And then each year you can see where all of a sudden it costs, and I'm not trying to scare you away from it. Okay, your company, if you put the value inside of your data center, it's worth it, right?
Well, Ronnie, and this also comes down to the fact that a smaller shop probably is not going to require those acceleration features. Larger enterprise environments, they will, and this is still much less expensive than going the traditional route. So don't let those prices scare you off and go, oh my goodness, I'm having heart palpitations, 20-something thousand dollars plus $6,000 a year in maintenance fees and things of that nature. Yeah, it seems like a lot, but I was telling Ronnie at the insurance company I worked for, our IT budget per year was over $2.5 million. So that was a drop in the bucket. It was like, yeah, so this is just the base stuff that we need to make our environment work. Okay, yeah, we get that. What else do we need to do? You know, it was an easy sign off because previous years we had to make it $4 million. You know, we had to have it when we kept trying to find ways to reduce costs. And when ESX came out, you know, we discovered VMware. It just dramatically reduced the amount of costs. We did the server consolidation. It saved us so much money. It's really crazy.
And don't forget that even though this is kind of the base things to really make it work the way that you want to, we're also going to mention briefly in the rest of our series here something that we call vRealize. Now, if you're familiar with the older, if you've been working with it, right, an older edition, it used to be called vCenter Operations Manager, but today they call it vRealize Operations Manager, and so we'll see features of that, and that is another additional thing. So just thinking that, hey, I'll just buy vSphere and it's going to work, well, remember that has to be built on top of that vCenter. And also, of course, underlying all that is actually that ESX, right? That ESXi, the hypervisor itself, which is also something else we need to spend a little bit of time doing. Now, by just saying that, right? Well, if I buy that, what does it really help me to overcome? What is it that I really have to do? And that's what we actually want to talk about for the remainder, since we actually did title the show here, Challenges.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that does bring up a good point is, now that we understand what we would need, you know, and see the different versions of VMware that we might work with vSphere, now it comes down to the challenges. How does that become a solution, and what is a solution to? What challenges does it address? And Ronnie, I guess the best place to start is management challenges.
Right. When we start taking a look at the idea of management challenges, a lot of times in terms of management, it's some of the things that really bug us. Okay, Daniel, let's see if this has ever happened to you. Okay. We buy a piece of software, okay, and you get it installed on several machines, and then 6 months later, it needs to be reinstalled again. Daniel, where is that piece of software?
Well, hopefully I've got maybe an ISO on a file share or something of that nature. That's typically what you would do.
Yeah, that's what you would think would end up happening. But sometimes, right, you know, I start off before the idea of ISOs came along, and you just had the disk, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, and I mean, who copies disks? I mean,
not many anymore.
Yeah, not many anymore. But I remember days when we would actually take that one master disk and essentially make multiple copies of it so that we wouldn't scratch that one master disk. And that way, if we were installing operating systems, whatever it was, we had like 4 or 5 sitting around. And all of a sudden, you know, a month later, we see one of those disks and they're like, what's this doing out here? We don't know, okay? Well, one of the things that is actually a challenge for us, of course, is what we call repositories. In other words, where do we tend to store all that stuff? And then how do we get it to people? Well, when you're off-site, right? Well, now that you call up Daniel and Daniel says, oh yeah, I'm going to put it in the share. That's what we would do today. Just access it from the share. But back when I started, it was like, I can send you a DVD of it, and it'll get there in 3 days, and hopefully, you know, you get it, and it's not scratched, it's not anything else. But repositories are actually very difficult to keep track of. And then, what if you actually set up some type of replication and it didn't happen? So between your site and another site that's actually pretty far off here, you go, oh no, it should be in the share. It's not in the share. It should be in the share. It's not in the share. Well, how do you deal with that replication issue? Well, the nice thing is, in the way that we actually work today, some of the challenges that we have, of course, are things like that. The other one is licensing as well, okay? Licensing and the ability of keeping track of all those licenses that we tend to actually push out there is nightmarish. My first instance of this was really having to deal with the newer licensing model that happened in Microsoft with their desktop operating systems, right? You had MAK keys, you had KMS keys, the ability to keep track of how many licenses went out versus how many came in. You know, make a little tool that says, oh, this should keep track of it for you, and all of a sudden you're still out of licenses, okay? Well, those are some of the challenges that we face inside of virtualization as well. Licensing, the idea of repositories and being able to get access to them when we need them, big, gigantic challenges that are out there. The good thing is with VMware's vSphere, right? They actually do build this stuff into the actual vSphere component itself. There is something that we call the content library, okay? And we're going to get into that a little bit more. But with the content library, we're going to see that that's some of the features that are built into vSphere that really do help us to be able to distribute that when we need it. And that way on the ESX host, it doesn't matter where that host is. If it's part of that original cluster that we have, it doesn't matter. We can actually say you can get access to it even if it doesn't reside on that same data store, that same data share. The idea of the content library is a big one. The same thing here with the idea of licensing. There is something that we call the PSC, the Platform Services Control. I want to make sure I read that right. And that helps you to manage all the licenses that you need inside of the virtualization platform as well. That way you're not hunting around like I used to do. You know, we just keep little sheets of paper and, you know, stuff it inside of a folder and hope that we could actually find it again. Well, now instead, of course, we can use something like this that can help us to keep track of the licensing expenditure as well as what licenses are out there. Management challenges like that are actually things that are not really related to virtualization, but the guys at VMware said, no, it really is. It can actually kind of affect whether or not you can build a VM if you don't have access to the right ISOs, you don't have access to the right files, then it doesn't help. Same thing with licenses. You can actually have all the ISOs where you want, but what if you can't track down the license? Well, that's why we actually have this. So even inside of challenges that we face for data center virtualization, just some of the management stuff that VMware vSphere really helps us do is kind of amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely an awesome product. They give us they had a lot of forethought when they put this thing together, and they try to address just about everything. Another topic that they addressed as far as challenges goes is scalability, and this is probably their bread and butter. Their ability to scale your environment at any given time is incredible, right, Ronnie?
It really is. They talk about in terms, and these are the two terms you want to make sure that you're familiar with: scaling up and scaling out. Now, I scale out fairly well every time I eat a meal, but scaling up, not so much so. Well, is there a real big difference? Not overall in the result, right? The idea of scaling out, of course, is that you want to build your business and be able to scale out and improve your marketplace. The idea of scaling up, of course, is meeting the demand that you currently have, just being able to do so when you need to. Well, inside of those, right, when we start taking a look at that idea, we want to avoid, of course, downtime as much as possible. We want to make sure we avoid any extended downtime, right? Sometimes downtime happens, and we actually want to address it as quickly as possible. But what we don't want to do is actually go, all right, the downtime happened. We said it would be up in 5 minutes. We're not up in 15. We're not up in an hour. Well, we want to actually try to remove that as much as we can, too. And then also, is all of the stuff that we have available across everything that we want, replication? These are also additional challenges as far as scalability goes. Network utilization, the more that we scale, right, the smaller our bandwidth may actually end up being, you know, kind of stretched out there as we utilize more of our current bandwidth. So VMware's vSphere also has additional solutions for this in terms of their high availability and fault tolerance to ensure that we actually don't have to worry about this even as we continue to scale, right? So that our machines that are currently operating will always be able to be operating the way that we want to. There's also a technology called vSphere replication that allows us to say, hey, when we actually do scale out, we can actually have all of our data replicated to those sites without having to worry about it as well. And then incremental types of backups that we call the data protection, the ability to ensure that we don't lose our data even as we scale. And so there's actually a lot more features that are actually available here, but these are some of those challenges that we have to actually deal with in terms of scalability to make sure that we can meet them. VMware, of course, says we have the solution for you.
Yeah, and as you can see, the people at VMware are taking the approach of, we don't want you to go anywhere else. We want you to just come here. We have all your fears and woes taken care of. Just let VMware handle things for you. And you know what? They've done a really good job. I'm not trying to like be a fanboy or whatever, but I'm kind of a fanboy. I've used this product, and I know how well and easy it'll make your life, which is exponentially grander when you start utilizing these things. Now, we're talking about different challenges. Another one of the different challenges that we can come up across is the optimization, right? We have to make these networks and these environments, should I say, highly tuned. We have to put the right amount of gas to air ratio, right, Ronnie?
You definitely have to, right? The very fact is, if we don't, one center actually becomes overutilized while another center doesn't actually become utilized at all. Well, how do you keep track of all that? How do you actually keep monitoring all that? Well, there's that vRealize product that we actually can end up using, and their operations manager is kind of the featured showpiece, right, of the management side of everything. Don't get me wrong, vSphere itself, right, gives us a ton of the products that we need to ensure that we have the infrastructure available and to ensure the basic connections. But if you want to tweak it and fine tune it like what Daniel's talking about, literally changing those knobs to actually make sure you have the proper mix and ratio of what needs to happen across your entire data center, well, that's where that vSphere Operations Manager comes in for you as well. So when you need you need to be able to do the monitoring, you need to be able to do those tuning operations. That's where that idea of that vRealize. Remember that the old term there is the vCenter Operations, now called vRealize. On each of these that we've talked about, we will actually be mentioning them again. So if you're going, like, man, you just zoomed through that, that's fine. You're going to see in our next series of episodes, we're going to kind of stop on each one, talk about them briefly, make sure you understand the features as well as, you know, some of the different things that it helps us to do again. So we'll kind of go over this list over and over again is what you'll hear, but much more in detail. And we'll talk about why those features are actually good and grand for us.
Yeah, we look forward to that, Ronnie. Looking at the clock though, and we've yabbed around about VMware for quite some time now, and our episode is coming to an end quite quickly. But we do thank you for stopping by. We thank you for exploring these things with us, showing us the path that VMware has laid out before us so we can get the right solution and address those challenges that we may meet in our environment. I'm really looking forward to seeing a little more of the depth that we get into in later shows. Well, we thank you again for stopping by. We thank you guys for watching. We're going to go ahead and sign off for IT Pro TV. I've been your host, Daniel Lowry.
And I'm Ronnie Wong.
And we'll see you next time.